course. Okay. Can I just say, I saw somebody else, and I can't remember who made this point. It was one of the guys at the Babylon Bee, I think, made this point on Twitter that, I was fine. I know it makes some people mad. I was fine when people would refer to Donald Trump as Orange Man. I mean, orange. I repeatedly say it does make some of his supporters mad when I say the left's reaction to Trump is Orange Man bad. But I mean, that is the left's reaction to everything Donald Trump did. But how can we not call Joe Biden tights after looking at his face last night? Has he had plastic surgery? I mean, the man's face, it is pulled back. I mean, goodness gracious. I don't know, maybe he's got Dick Clark's genes. I don't know. But good gracious, his face is pulled. I mean, it's tight. It is tight. He gets on television, and, well, here we go.
When I took office 50 days ago, only 8% of Americans, after months, only 8% of those over the age of 65 had gotten their first vaccination. Today, that number is 65%. Just 14% of Americans over the age of 75 50 days ago had gotten their first shot. Today, that number is well over 70%. With new guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, that came out on Monday, it means simply this: millions and millions of grandparents who went months without being able to hug their grandkids can now do so. And the more people are fully vaccinated, the CD will continue to provide additional guidance on what you can do in the workplace, places of worship with your friends, as well as travel. When I came into office, you may recall, I set a goal that many of you said was kind of way over the top. I said I intended to get 100 million shots in people's arms in my first 100 days in office. Tonight, I can say we're not only going to meet that goal, we're going to beat that goal, because we're actually on track to reach this goal of 100 million shots in arms on my 60th day in office. No other country in the world has done this. None.
The day before Joe Biden came into office, on the last full 24-hour period of the Trump presidency, more than 1 million people were given the COVID vaccine. I'm old enough to remember when the American media told us that it was impossible for there to be a vaccine release before the summer. I'm old enough to remember when the media ridiculed Donald Trump for suggesting even if there was a vaccine, it would be possible to have a mass rollout. We were already, before Joe Biden became president, giving more than 1 million vaccines a day. Now, it is a perfectly political thing for Joe Biden to say, hey, I set a goal of 100 million vaccines and we're going to meet it within 60 days instead of the 100 days. God bless him. Good for him. Donald Trump would have met that goal as well, because we were well on the way of getting there while he was still president. But he set a goal, and he used a very large number in a very short time period that he could do because of the present rate of vaccinations and meet that goal. Hands down, was going to meet that goal. And you know what? That's fair. That's politics. He's allowed to do that. I would point out to you, however, that if the American press were treating Joe Biden like they treated Donald Trump, they would point out that, of course, he was going to meet that goal. It wasn't even a challenge to meet that goal. The goal wasn't a challenge. It was the inevitable, obvious stopping point or goal-crossing moment based on where we were thanks to Donald Trump's administration. I mean, this is the way the press reaction is. The Politico playbook sums up perfectly exactly what's happening. It is hard to imagine any other contemporary politician making the speech Joe Biden did Thursday night, both channeling our collective sorrow and reminding us that there is life after grief. I feel like I should put like 1970s disco porn style music over that. It is hard to imagine any other contemporary politician making the speech Joe Biden did Thursday night. It's a Harry Met Sally moment. They're like, oh, Joe. This is embarrassing. Of course he was going to meet the 100 million vaccine point when we were already doing more than 1 million a day before he became president. And everybody in the media is like, it's a miracle. If Trump were here, there'd be 5 people vaccinated and their last names would all be Trump. No. I'm going to do this anyway. This isn't on him. And I please do keep in mind that despite what may sound like a criticism of Biden, it's not actually a criticism of Biden. It's a criticism of the press. Biden's a politician. Politicians do that sort of stuff. Politicians like to take credit for those sorts of things. Politicians like to set goals. They like to set easily obtainable goals that involve big numbers so that they can say they got there and everybody gives them a standing ovation. But it's the press that's the deal here, not Biden. It's the press. Because if it was Donald Trump, well, we don't even have to play hypothetical here. We know they said it was impossible, and then when it became reality, they never wanted to give him credit. They were actually what we were saying is that it would probably happen in these technical ways. I mean, the whole thing was garbage nonsense by the American media, and the press. I mean, like Tucker Carlson. We'll get into this later. Tucker Carlson made criticisms about women in the military. The Pentagon has come out and blasted him for doing so. And the American, well, of course they are. They're defending their soldiers. I'm old enough to remember when if the Pentagon had attacked any member of the press or any TV celebrity for their free speech statements, the media would have been, oh my gosh, how could we do this? And, you know, here's the thing. We have this changing of the norms within the American media and how they've covered this for some time and how they've given a pass on this. Like, for example, you had Joe Biden say this.
Why? And the biggest thing, though, as you remember, when you and I shouldn't say it that way, as you remember, but when you and I talked last, we talked about it's one thing to have the vaccine, which we didn't have when we came into office, but a vaccinator.
We didn't have the vaccine when we came into office. Remember all the goalposts in the media? It's like, well, I don't know. And then after all of this, you still got the media having said repeatedly that it wouldn't happen. I mean, to the media's credit, to some degree, they did have to walk it back once it got approved by the FDA. But I mean, the entire time the media was downplaying it. And now that Joe Biden makes a goal that was, of course, going to be launched, of course it was going to be met. It's, of course the media, it's just the leg humping. It is leg humping is what it is. Now, what about the rest of the details of it? We should get into that. We should note that essentially Joe Biden is saying we should go back to a kind of normal by July. We don't quite know what kind of normal is going to be. Will people be able to be in groups? He's saying that the CDC is going to come out with further guidelines. What will those further guidelines look like? I got to tell you, as more and more people get vaccinated, you're going to see the fall off in masks happen. And the media, of course, I'm sure is going to go back into hysterics. Oh, the virus is rebounding again. Maybe the vaccines don't work. The level of reporting from the media on this has always been bad. You know, in Georgia, there was a big New York Times report a couple of weeks ago that it looks like the virus may be on the rise again in several states, including Georgia. No, actually, Georgia is on the decline pretty significantly. What is notable is the New York Times is leaving Georgia as a state where the virus is high, but going down, and the virus is now lower than it was at any point prior to the big upswing, or any point after the big George Floyd protest upswing. It's actually pretty remarkable that we are now at a point in Georgia where the actual daily cases, we got 1,153 in the 7-day moving average. There is not a moment in the tracking where Georgia has been in confirmed cases or in the 7-day moving average less than that since June 23rd. Pretty momentous where we are. June 23rd. That's a really big deal. It is worth noting that we finally hit that point. We're back. Now, the governor of Georgia is talking about rolling back restrictions. Other states have already done it. Texas, of course, is rolling them back. Ron DeSantis has been rolling it back. And you notice the media is still attacking Ron DeSantis for having the audacity to keep his state open. And yet the numbers in Florida look really, really good. The numbers in Florida are terrific. And we should all be pleased with what's happening in our state and around the country. And regardless of what Joe Biden says or not, it is worth noting that it was the Trump administration that actually did produce the vaccine. Operation Warp Speed really is what helped. Operation Warp Speed is that thing that caused this to happen. You know, the European Union is now attacking the United States and Great Britain, which have both outperformed the European Union. They're attacking Great Britain and the United States for not doing enough to share the vaccine. You know, I want to go back to November. It was after the election, but Jake Tapper is one of the very few members of the media outside of Fox News to say this.
Most freezers that exist in these large hospitals and pharmacies and things can keep the vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, at that temperature. So existing sort of supply chain in terms of the cold storage is there. So that's going to make it an advantage, I think, for the Moderna one.
And we should take a note a moment, as we always have when discussing vaccine and Operation Warp Speed, that this is, putting aside all of the failures of the Trump administration when it comes to the coronavirus, and there are lots. This is an unmitigated success, and we should acknowledge that. The Moderna vaccine was done with funds from Operation Warp Speed, and the Pfizer one has funding when it comes to the distribution and manufacture. And I just think it's important that people working so hard, Moncef Slaoui and the others, get credit for this. And President Trump was the one who okayed it.
You got to put in the caveat so he's not eaten alive by Boko Haram, but President Trump gets credit for that. There aren't enough people in the media willing to point that out, though. But President Trump deserves credit for Operation Warp Speed. And you know what's so crazy here? Are the number of people who still go ballistic when I point that out. The number of people who you want to give the president accurate, honest, fair credit. And they get mad at you for doing so. But sometimes, you got to give credit. Credit where it's due. Credit where it is. It's worth highlighting that some of the stuff the media says isn't quite honest. I mean, that's a lot of what the media says. But when Joe Biden comes out and says we didn't have the vaccine when we came into office, but hey, we're going to meet our goals, a fair-minded media would point out that, in fact, the vaccine did exist, the distribution chain existed, and we were already on the way to meeting the goal before Joe Biden came into office. And all Biden did was grab hold of a goal that the Trump administration made possible for him to reach. They will never say that, though, because Orange Man bad.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Let's go to the phones. Joe and LJ, my friend, how are you?
Eric, I'm doing great, and always good to talk to you. Enjoy your show. I just want to make a couple of brief comments. I think it's important. We live in LJ, the encouragement capital of the world, and we believe in encouraging people and lifting them up, and I know you believe in that. And also, I do think that with the budget deficit close to $30 trillion, we must start cut spending and cut waste. I know you realize there's a lot of waste and excessive spending in Washington, and I know we all need to impress upon our elected leaders the importance of cutting spending and cutting waste. And I just want to say that we'll always encourage you. Keep up the good work, and thank you for letting me participate in your wonderful show.
Joe, look, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for that. He's right. The spending issue is going to be the next big issue, and the Democrats, of course, want you to know that you should all be grateful for them driving up the national debt. But here's a problem. I can say this because I have been fairly intellectually consistent on that particular issue. Unfortunately, there are a whole lot of Republicans who also blew up the national debt. And it's unfortunate. It's going to be necessary for us, I think, over time to deal with the issue of the national debt. Dan Crenshaw was on yesterday talking about national debt as an issue. And it's deeply frustrating to me, the number of people out there who are unwilling to treat this as a serious issue unless the other side is in power. Democrats complain about it when Republicans are in power. Republicans complain about it when Democrats are in power. At some point, we're going to have to be adults and have a real conversation about the spending issue. And it goes to this COVID situation and the COVID bailout. We're going to go bankrupt as a nation. Our kids are going to be left holding the bag. Our grandkids are going to be left holding the bag. And, by the way, here's one of the real problems we're going to face. I tend to believe that we are going to start seeing inflation come back in the economy. We haven't seen inflation in a great long time. And one of the reasons we haven't seen inflation for a long time is American energy production. The cost of energy production in this country, thanks to coal, natural gas, and fossil fuels, frankly, has allowed us to avoid inflation because energy costs have stayed so low. They're one reason, at least, that we haven't seen inflation. But as we shift to expensive, subsidized renewables and invest in power grid updates and the like, we're going to start seeing energy costs go up. That will be passed on to consumers as consumer inflation. As the economy comes back to life, we're going to see inflation. We're going to have to raise interest rates. And when we do, that's going to directly impact the interest rate on the national debt. Congress, at this point, we don't have enough money coming in to deal with that situation. We do not have enough money as a society to cover the interest on the debt if interest rates go up. Taxes will have to go up. That will cause a recession. All of this is foreseeable. All of this is knowable. Anyone who cares to pay attention to it can see it for themselves. And this is going to be deeply, deeply, deeply troubling for our economy and for Democrat reelection chances when it happens. Nobody wants to deal with that particular issue right now, Democrat or Republican. They just want to use it as a weapon against each other. And at some point, we're going to have to take action on it. And we need to. We got to deal with this issue. All right, when we come back, Ron DeSantis, what he said, the media is having nothing to do with it. Oh, and there's more on Rebecca Jones. Remember her? We'll get into that when we come back. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Let us go to the phones to Sean. You're going to be next. Welcome.
Hey, Eric. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great. Hey, and I just wanted to point out, I mean, you pointed out to us how the media not reporting the facts, and, the media is given it's freedom of the press. And I'd say the reason we have freedom of the press is for the media to report the facts and not be biased and not be propagandist. And I just want to ask, don't you think that affected the outcome of the election?
I think it always does, actually, Sean. I think the media, it's not like they are suddenly hostile towards Republicans or conservatives. They have been for a long time. And frankly, I think that's one reason cancel culture has come on so fierce, is because with even before Trump's election, with George, going all the way back to George Bush or before that, but really with Trump in the last few years, the cancel culturists, many of whom occupy seats in the media, realize that conservatives are able to get their message out through talk radio, through the internet, through Fox News, and they deeply, deeply hate that. So they got to cancel those institutions. They think they've got a monopoly to be able to control the information. And if you listen to mainstream media outlets, they absolutely do. And yet Republicans are still able to win. Now, it's worth noting that in the last, I guess, 7 out of 8 presidential elections, Republicans have lost the popular vote, but they've still managed to win with the Electoral College with Donald Trump. And then they've also been able to win in Congress pretty significantly. So the media has got to work with the Democrats to censor, to shut up, to keep people quiet, to tell stories that may not necessarily be true. And we need to be mindful of that stuff because it's totally happening. It is 100% happening across the board, that the media tries to dominate and tries to tell stories, not the truth. And that's one of the keys here. One of the most common words you hear now in coverage of things is narrative. Narrative is storytelling. People want storytellers. I hear this all the time in talk radio. We do a lot of research on the show. We do a lot of research. My company for my evening show does a ton of research. And the thing here is we want storytelling. We want people who can tell a story. Everybody wants a bedtime story. Well, what you hear in the media and the like is narrative. We need a narrative. And what the press does is they leave out facts that might change the story. The media comes into this. Politicians come into it, and they want to tell a story. They want to tell a story that has villains and good guys, protagonists and antagonists, who, what, where, when, why, and how. Why and how are the big ones now. How did the antagonist do such a nasty thing? Why did the antagonist do it? How did the protagonist overcome? And occasionally in telling the story, they run into nasty little facts that get in the way of their story. And the way they deal with those facts is to ignore them. And along comes, let's say, Fox News and says, well, actually, let's talk about the facts they left out of the story. How dare you do that, undermining my narrative? And it's my truth now. Who cares what the truth is? It's my truth. People want to hide behind my truth to avoid the fact that they're full of crap. They want to avoid the actual fact. Let's look at Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, whose state has outperformed New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, all those New England Democrat states. You would never know it. You would think he was a mass murderer in the media. They have willfully ignored facts. That Rebecca Jones woman showed up, the data analyst who got fired, claimed to be some sort of Dr. Fauci of Florida. The media heralded her as some sort of hero. Turns out she's kind of nuts. She's being charged with a felony. She's got a history of issues. She's not a credible source. but the media needed someone, so they left out all of the facts that could cause doubt about her veracity to make her sound truthful. You would never know all of the details, the arrest, the charges, anything like that, because the media needs her in the narrative to be the protagonist so they can make DeSantis the bad guy. But he's not. In fact, if there's a bad guy in the story, it's her, which you wouldn't know from the media. And now, of course, people in the media have to walk her back. And you know, again, Jake Tapper, one of the very few people in the media, particularly at CNN, where they've just built this woman into some sort of martyr. And he's one of the very few people to point out to people she's actually a terrible person with a history of not quite telling the truth. And people in the media should stop building her up. And she attacked him, and other people in the press attacked him for pointing that out. It's all about the narrative storytelling. But here's a point. This is really important. Republicans still win. Republicans still win. The media has spent how many months telling us that those summer protests and riots weren't riots, that they were peaceful, that nothing violent happened, that no one was injured? And yet the American public saw right through that. The American public actually rejected all of the Democrats who supported defund the police. Why? Because we are less and less dependent on the national American media. So I have a Substack newsletter. You can subscribe to it. You should subscribe to it. It's a great way to actually support the growth of this program. $7 a month, $70 a year. If you text DATA to 33777, you can get a lot of it for free. Some stuff you got to pay for. And the media is coming for Substack. The media, there's a journalism professor from Los Angeles, UCLA, saying essentially Substack needs to be censored, monitored, and regulated because it's going to hurt the newsrooms of America. We're very much back. If you'll recall, in 2004, it was the Powerline blog brought down Dan Rather. The Powerline blog was able to show that the letter Dan Rather had that purported to be a letter from George W. Bush's commander in the National Guard saying that Bush was skipping assignments or whatnot. I forget all the details, but that it was an authentic letter. And Powerline blog was able to show that it was an impossibility for that letter to be real. And the reason it was is because based on the date it was written, there was not computers didn't exist. It had to have been written on a typewriter, and there was not a typewriter in the world that could reproduce the font in that letter. The only way to reproduce that font was in Microsoft Word, where it was an in-house font. No typewriter could have shaped the letters on the page in that way. And it brought down Dan Rather and his producer, Mary Mape or whatever her name was, and it ruined Rather's career and exposed the media. And you had voices at the New York Times say, well, you know, bloggers don't have editors. We have editors. Who gave you Jason Blair and all the fabulists within the New York Times and the like? The media doesn't like the competition, and they are livid that conservatives can bypass them to get their message out. And yet we still do it quite successfully. We still win elections, which is why cancel culture has picked up steam to try to stamp out those alternative voices, including my own, so that you're required to listen to MSNBC and read the New York Times. And they're not going to be successful. Now, on DeSantis, I want to play this clip from him. It's actually, it's kind of a big clip, kind of long, but this is very much worth me playing so you can hear the contrast between what's actually happening in Florida and what the press is saying and what's going on in the rest of the nation.
We've had visitation for a long time. We want them to do whatever's best for their residents. And so if there's anything they need us to do, we're happy to do something for it. But this is all about the well-being of those residents and making sure that, yes, take steps, which we have done, to protect their lives. Florida was the first state to vaccinate nursing home residents because the CVS and Walgreens, their program started basically a week after the first vaccines hit. And so, which was fine. I mean, that's what they had planned. And we said, you know what? We got to go. So we did 106 nursing homes in Broward and Pinellas with our strike teams, first one on the ground there doing it. So we've done all that. All 4,000 facilities in Florida have been offered a vaccine. Now, most seniors have taken it. Not all of them have, which is fine. But they have done that. We've done things to offer the protection, and now protect life, but also make sure it's a life worth living. Make sure they have fulfillment. Make sure they have the ability to work with, see family members and do all that. And when you reunite, I mean, we had stories when this first started of family members not being allowed in. We had a lady, great lady here in Jacksonville. Her husband was in a memory care facility, so she got a job to work there just so she could see him. And so these are things that we want to link people together. We want that. That's a very important part of living life. And isolation is very, very destructive. And the thing I hear, I was just talking to a friend of mine who was in D.C., and he's like, the difference between Florida and D.C. is like, it's dead. It's totally dead. Here, people are living life. They're happier. And things are you just want to be here compared to that. And I think that has an effect far beyond these nursing homes in there, but I think it's most acute in the nursing homes. So God bless those nursing home residents. They've been through an awful lot over the past year. But yes, we got to do whatever we can to bring fulfillment to them. So if any of those facilities have any need for the state to help them out on any of that, we're ready, willing, and able. We were the first with the testing. We were the first with the protections against the discharges into the facilities, first with the vaccines, and we want to be first to help them reach the fulfillment that they need.
Look, the media knows Ron DeSantis is probably the 2024 frontrunner if Trump doesn't win. Media knows this. They're going to do everything they can over the next 4 years to try to wreck Ron DeSantis' career. And I don't think they're going to be successful. I don't think they're going to be able to silence or censor Ron DeSantis. In large part because, again, DeSantis has ways to get his message out. DeSantis has ways to bypass the New York media. And by the way, there's something you probably don't know. I did not know this until beginning a career within the media. In fact, people always tell me, you're the media. I tell people all the time, I'm in it, I'm not of it. I live in Macon, Georgia. If I'm on TV, it's via satellite. It's rarely in a studio anywhere. But I interact a lot with people. I get questions from people. I have a lot of followers on social media. Hands down, if you want to know where the conservatives are in the media, it's local media. It is the local reporters, even at a lot of newspapers, who tend to actually be center right. In fact, it's only a matter of time before woke culture comes for local media. It's your TV anchor in Macon, Georgia, or Augusta, Georgia, or Atlanta, Georgia, who quietly leans right. It's the local crime reporter for your local newspaper who's a conservative. And they have internalized that there's no advancement into the national media because of their politics and views. So they stay where they are and they deliver competent, quality, conservative news at a local level. Now, local news is on hard times. It's always been funny to me to see so many people in the media say, we got to save local media. What you're actually doing is you're saving conservatives in the media. That's where they are. And so God bless them. I mentioned yesterday the Monroe County Reporter, a local newspaper here in Middle Georgia, covers mostly Monroe County. It's a once-a-week publication, a pretty conservative shop. The local bureaucrats can't stand them as a result of them having a conservative editorial voice and a conservative worldview. I know reporters at the Telegraph in Macon who are definitely conservative. They're quiet in the newsroom because it's a McClatchy is an international news organization that owns that paper, but they're there. Even at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I know a number of reporters who are Trump supporters. I know at the AJC, they're there. And they shape the local news. And it is remarkable how many of these people know they've got to keep quiet, but their worldview informs how they see the news headlines and how they shape and deliver and cover the news. And worldview is really what matters here. You don't have to put the GOP sticker on your car. You don't have to wave the red flag of your political ideology. You can let your worldview shape how you cover the news. And if you're conservative, it's going to come out. People are going to realize it by the stuff you care about, don't care about, the way you weave facts into what you're reporting, the narrative you're telling as opposed to the narrative they're telling. And by and large, you're going to get more conservative coverage at the local level than you will at the national level. There are some good national reporters who are quietly conservative. Oftentimes they get pulled out of the big coverage and the big beats because their editors know it and don't want them there actually telling people the truth. But a few of them exist. But my goodness gracious, there is definitely a cancel culture war, and it's coming for the truth. And the truth of the matter is Ron DeSantis is doing a great job in Florida, and he's still going to be able to get that story out. And that's one of the reasons the media is so infuriated. They would very much like to stop him from advancing.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect blend.
Sorry. So I gotta click. I've got 3 massive monitors, and I gotta be able to click my mouse when I come back to get some stuff going on my computer every time we come back from commercial break. And occasionally on these 3 monitors, I lose where my mouse is. You know, with a Mac now, you can, if you shake the trackpad or like run your finger across it, it's supposed to make your mouse expand gigantically so you can see it, and sometimes it doesn't work. This is my problem with woke culture, if I'm honest about it. I'm an Apple guy, and I realize Apple is like the most notorious of the social justice warrior technology companies. But I'm not giving up my Mac. Shut up, Charlie. Shut up. No, get your hands off the keyboard. I know what you're saying to me right now. My producer is I make him use a Mac, but he is totally not down with the Apple universe of doing things. And it's unfortunate I had actually ordered I haven't even told him this. I had ordered him an iPhone. I was convinced I could convince him to go back to an iPhone, but he wasn't doing it. So I passed it along to someone else who will actually use it and respect it and treasure it. That's fine. I just, in any event, yeah, I almost think it's defiance, by the way. You know how sometimes you tell your kid to do something, your kid refuses. You want your producer to use like the Apple universe where I can actually generate blue text message bubbles to him. Look, I'm not poor. I don't want to see green bubbles. Gotta generate those green bubbles when you text with him and his freaking Android device. All right, we must move on. When we come back, we got to get into some Georgia news. In fact, I wanna get into news down in South Georgia. One of our affiliates down there is co-owned by the mayor of Valdosta, and the Wokes are coming for the mayor of Valdosta for owning a conservative radio station and being on that station. But before we do there, speaking of the Wokes, they're canceling Pepe Le Pew. Pepe Le Pew, I don't know if you know this, but Pepe Le Pew, the French skunk, was actually to parody the bad behavior perceived to be of the French, the almost rapiness of what was perceived in the media's French culture. You know how Pepe Le Pew was. It was actually to parody it and shun that behavior. Well, the Wokes, of course, don't get subtlety or satire, and they're banning Pepe Le Pew now. Woke tyrants ride high despite 62% of Americans disliking them and censoring their own political expression. Only a tiny amount of consumers care about Mr. Potato Head's toxic masculinity, about Aunt Jemima as a brand, and about Me Too aggression of Pepe Le Pew, yet corporations, universities, and governments rush to placate the minuscule slice of population. It's happening not because anybody voted for it, but because the small but determined and vicious minority is bullying people. I was always told you're supposed to stand up to bullies. And it seems like people are, particularly in corporate culture, they're bending over backwards to placate the bullies. They're bending over backwards to silence the mob. And why? Why are we Why are we caving to a small minority? It's like Amazon. You know, I had Ryan Anderson on yesterday. They've sold his book for 3 years and they won't now because they say they're no longer going to sell books that claim transgenderism is a mental health issue when it truthfully is. So you can lie and sell your book but not tell the truth. And it's like, what, not even 5/10 of the population? Half of 1% of the population, and they're going to censor everyone because of it because they don't want to hurt the feelings of the woke bullies who are shutting everyone down. This is pathetic, but the Fortune 500 is in on it. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. If you are wanting to call in the program, you're more than welcome to call in if you want. And you can also reach out to me on social media at EW Erickson, and you can go to EWErickson.com or ErickEricksonShow.com. In fact, the rib recipe, if you didn't sign up for the email or you didn't get it, it went out this morning. Finally, it went out this morning. You can go to EWErickson.com, and if you look up at the top of the site, you'll see the recipes, or if you're on your cell phone, you'll see a little hamburger, the little 3 lines, and you click it, you'll find recipes, and you'll see the 3-2-1 smoked ribs recipe. I encourage you to get the smoked rib recipe. It's actually really good. And a buddy of mine is texting me right now saying, I wish it had come in. I ruined it. I used the Myron Mixon recipe and was described as ribs. Like, you do have to get ribs that have meat on the bone. If you don't have a lot of meat on the bone, if they're stripped too lean, that's not going to work. Charlie won't let you call in with your cooking questions, although it is Friday. All right, we got other stuff. I just, all right. You know what? Let me short circuit this. If I sound somewhat distracted, it is because I am, and I can't tell you why yet. And I keep scanning, waiting to be able to tell you why. I'm a little distracted. There's some news coming about me today, and I'm not allowed to talk about it until the news comes. And I will actually not be here next week as it relates to that news. And I'm going to take a couple of days off in anticipation of what's about to come. And as soon as I can tell y'all, I will tell y'all. Those of you who get my Substack email will definitely get notice about it after it happens. But I'm going to take off a couple of days. I'm going to go out for some solitude. Yes, Las Vegas, but I'm not staying in Vegas. I am going to go out to the Mojave Desert, fly around in helicopters and shoot guns, not out of helicopters. I've shot machine guns out of helicopters before, and it's fun. But I'm actually going to fly out into the Grand Canyon and shoot guns in the Grand Canyon, in a place where you can do that within the Grand Canyon, and just to hang out for a few days and rest. I'm hoping before I get off air at noon, I can discuss with you. Otherwise, you're going to have to subscribe to my Substack email so that you can get the information. Since I'll be gone next week, I won't be here to be able to tell you about the news. It's supposed to come out at some point soon, the news. I hate to leave you. I hate to tease you, but that's what we do in radio. I'll tell you as soon as I can tell you. Right now, the wokes are coming for the mayor of Valdosta, Georgia. Now, full disclosure here, you do need to know, we are on the radio in Valdosta. And we're on a station that I believe the mayor, Scott Matheson, who's actually, I've interviewed him on this program about something related to Augusta, or to Valdosta. He's been on the program. He is the mayor, and the wokes have come for him. Now, an ethics complaint was filed against Mayor Scott James Matheson. And the reason the ethics complaint was filed, it was the NAACP and a local woke social justice warrior professor at, I believe, Valdosta State, who filed it. They claim that he mixes his role as mayor and a conservative radio commentator. That's right. They want the mayor removed from office because he owns a conservative talk radio station and also is on that talk radio station. Here is the latest from the Valdosta Daily Times. Senior Southern Circuit Judge H. Arthur McLean is the final member of a 3-person panel to evaluate an ethics complaint claiming Mayor Scott James Matheson mixes his role as mayor with his career as a conservative radio commentator. Valdosta City Council approved McLean in a 6-1 Thursday evening vote based on the recommendation from the 2 other ethics panel members, Jim Tunnison, a former Southern Circuit judge, and Robert Jefferson. Tennyson and Jefferson were selected by the mayor and council respectively 2 weeks ago. Councilman Eric Howard opposed the selection of McLean, saying he would have preferred a more objective or neutral nomination. Howard said having two panel members, Tennyson and McLean, who are friendly with Matheson, does not seem to create an impartial board. He doesn't want the community to think the board review will finish quickly without any merit. City Manager Mark Barber said Tennyson and Jefferson tried finding other members, but to no avail. Barber said he supplied council members with an email detailing the search process. We went through a lot of folks, the email read. A lot of folks aren't interested. Some weren't qualified. With the approval, the ethics board can set its own meeting times and discuss how it will evaluate the ethics complaint. The ordinance allows them to interview people, review video, anything they want to do. They can do their due diligence to make sure they're making the right decision on the situation, Barber said. No city staff, council, or the mayor will be involved. City involvement is scaled to providing any documentation needed and a meeting place. The latter is set to be a city hall conference room. After making a decision on the complaint, the board has 7 days to deliver it to council. The chairman of the board will present it to the council. A coalition of 4 organizations, the Mary Turner Project, NAACP Lowndes Chapter, Concerned Clergies of Valdosta, and the Valdosta Lowndes Community Alliance, filed the ethics complaint, saying the mayor would not listen to their concerns. The complaint, signed by Dr. Mark Patrick George, the Reverend Darnell Neal, Dr. Bruce Francis, and Jimmy Boyd, representing the respective organizations, claims Matheson, quote, demonstrated he is incapable of and or uninterested in representing all citizens of Valdosta equally in presenting himself as the Valdosta mayor on his weekday radio show, Talk 92.1. The complaint alleges the on-air rhetoric regularly disseminates inaccurate, divisive, and inflammatory claims that often demonize local citizens and political viewpoints that differ from his own. Oh, poor babies! They want the mayor ousted from his job, duly elected by the citizens of Valdosta, who, by the way, he had this job before they voted for him, and now they want him gone for doing the same job in the exact same way. They say he failed to give the public the appearance of being independent, impartial, and responsible to the people, and failed to conduct himself so as to not create any question or concern as to the appropriateness, legality, or sincerity of any action, creating doubt as to the ability to provide the public with confidence in the integrity of the government, failing to use the power of his position for the well-being of constituents, and using rhetoric that fails to create an environment of honesty, openness, and integrity. Man, these people, somebody needs to send them a box of feminine hygiene products. Good grief. What an embarrassment. Okay, here, my friends, is what's going on. Around the state of Georgia, good governance groups, which are always progressives, they don't really want good government. They want left-wing government. They just call it good government. It's a branding decision. They decided to draft model ethics ordinances that various cities could draft. When I was on the city council in Macon, I blocked the ethics ordinance, refused to have it enacted, did my best to put up every roadblock possible to kill it, because this is exactly what I said would happen. And I was joined by some Democratic members of the city council of Macon. Macon had the only partisan city council in Georgia. Valdosta City Council is nonpartisan. I said it would be weaponized by people. I was joined actually by some of the members of the left-wing members of the city council, because they knew it would be too. If you don't like someone, if you don't like their dealings, if you don't like their personal conduct, you file an ethics complaint. Say, well, this guy can't represent us fairly and honestly because he has political views he's sharing. It's a matter of free speech. And by the way, I don't think an ethics ordinance should or can trump a city charter that allows a mayor to be elected in such a way that he has views and he's allowed to express those views. And you may not like those views, but that's on you. That's not on him. By the way, you don't have to listen to his radio program. Now, they're claiming that he didn't deal fairly with them. He was unable to be impartial because of his divisive comments on radio. that says way more about them than him. Essentially what they're saying is, we don't get our way with this guy, and he's a conservative, and he says so on radio, therefore we want him gone, never mind that the people of Valdosta elected him. This is dangerous territory. This is a sub-branch of Boko Haram. These people are essentially engaging in terrorist activity where they want a man stripped of his lawfully elected position because they don't like his political views, and they couldn't beat him at the polls, and so they want the city council and an ethics commission to throw him out of office. This is dangerous rhetoric. And by the way, I don't think that the ethics commission can strip the mayor of his position. I don't think they can oust him because of his free speech. He's got a free speech right. And his ability to voice his views on radio, they may not be able to separate the two, but the reality is, under the law, you got to separate him because he is a radio show host. There is no rule that he has to give up that job to be the mayor of Valdosta. And by the way, there's no rule in Valdosta, ethics commission, ordinance, or otherwise, that he's got to meet with people who are openly hostile to him. He doesn't have to do it. And that's for the voters. It's not for them. These people are bullies. These people are bullies. They call themselves good governance. They make it about good governance, but actually they're bullies. And if the Valdosta City Council doesn't stand up to them, eventually they will come for the Valdosta City Council. This is why I opposed the ethics ordinance in Macon and was able to get it killed. Because it is so easy to be weaponized. And it will be weaponized, and the cities that have adopted it have seen it be weaponized by, usually, it's rarely is it ever a conservative who decides to file an ethics complaint and demand the ouster of someone on the left they disagree with. Rarely does that happen. It is always the ninnies on the left who need their feminine hygiene products, who get their panties in a wad over someone daring to say something conservative. Well, we got to shut this guy up. He's not representing us by articulating his views. You know, so I was filling in on the radio in Macon when I was on city council, and my goodness, they would do the same thing to me. The wokes would all get bent out of shape anytime I said anything. And these were the precursors. I'll never forget one time they tried to make Barack Obama an honorary member of our city council, and I filibustered it. I mean, I really literally filibustered it. I kept filing them. I had like a stack of, you had to write amendments, and I had a stack over 100 amendments. And I was sat on the committee that oversaw the ordinance, and so I got to submit my amendments, and they couldn't stop me from submitting my amendments on the way that committee worked. We dragged that meeting out for hours, and the wokes just glared at me the whole time. I can't believe you do this. I can't, you racist. On and on and on. And you know what? Barack Obama never became an honorary member of our city council. Had we had the ethics ordinance, undoubtedly they would have come after me. It's what they do. They weaponize the law in their behalf. It's not a law about ethics in government. It's a law about being able to bully people. The Valdosta City Council, shame on them if they don't stand up to the woke mob. Shame on them if they don't stand up to the bullies. The mayor of Valdosta is allowed to be on the radio, and he is allowed to speak freely his views on the radio. And if the wokes don't like it, the wokes can grow a pair and grow up and move on. But they don't want to. They would rather be victims. Victims, we're victims because the mayor shared views we don't like. Boo-hoo. Boo freaking who. If you don't like it, pack up and move.
There's not my truth or your truth. There is only
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We do need to talk about the border crisis here, but before I do, I want to spend a little bit of time on the Democrats' next big issue, guns. Here's Chuck Schumer.
The legislative graveyard is over. H.R. 8 will be on the floor of the Senate, and we will see where everybody stands. No more hopes and prayers, thoughts and prayers. A vote is what we need. A vote, not thoughts and prayers. And we will see where people stand.
We will see where people stand, Chuck Schumer says. By the way, if he sounded muffled, he was wearing his mask. Here's Senator Blumenthal.
The support for universal background checks is nearly universal. Almost everybody in the country, including gun owners, NRA members, want it. And the principle should be no check, no sale. No check, no gun. That's the way to make America safer. And I think with the leadership of our great leader, Senator Schumer, we have a real opportunity to make history here. I'm asked often, what has changed since Sandy Hook? We have a growing grassroots political movement with leaders at the local level changing history. And we have House members who have run on this issue, who have not just answered questions, they've made it a priority. And so I think the implosion of the NRA, the growing support among the American people, and the inevitability of increased support gives us an opportunity we haven't had before. We need not only background checks and closing the Carlson loophole, but also emergency risk protection orders, safe storage, Ethan's Law, repeal of PLACA, a number of measures that provide a comprehensive solution. There's no single cure, but I think we can do it with the kind of support that we're seeing this morning.
They want to pass new gun restrictions. This is one offered up by Lucy McBath here in Georgia, whose son was killed in gun violence. She's made gun control her big cause, and this is why the filibuster is important. One of the things you need to understand that the House Democrats are doing is they're trying to send over a bunch of progressive legislation to the Senate to try to pressure the Democrats into caving on the filibuster. Now, one of the arguments I find very, very funny is that they're claiming that, well, if Republicans were in charge, they'd get rid of the filibuster, except Republicans were in charge of the Senate up until 2 months ago, and they didn't get rid of the legislative filibuster. In fact, a number of things Republicans wanted got killed because of the filibuster, and they didn't get rid of it. They're not going to get rid of the Democrats want the Senate Democrats to get rid of it. Joe Manchin keeps, I gotta say this, because people go, oh my gosh, did you hear what Joe Manchin said about the filibuster? You got to get rid of the filibuster. Joe Manchin's not getting rid of the filibuster. Joe Manchin said he is willing to reform the filibuster such that you have to stay on the floor and do a real filibuster, which is the current rule. It's just unenforced. And essentially, Manchin saying, I'm willing to enforce the rule, but you're still going to have to get 60 votes. Chuck Schumer could force a real filibuster if he wanted. For all of these pieces of legislation, Chuck Schumer could force a real filibuster. But Chuck Schumer hasn't forced a real filibuster. He could force them, and it would take about 2 to 3 weeks. The rules of the Senate is every senator gets to speak twice on a piece of legislation. And he could let them do it. He could let them speak twice. It would take 2 weeks, more likely than not, 2 to 3 weeks, and they would have to stay in the Senate while this filibuster went on. And then when the filibuster ended, they could vote. But see, time is precious in the Senate, they think. If they really cared about this gun control issue, instead of using it as a political issue, Schumer would just force the filibuster. Force them to be there and talk. Bring in the cots. They keep cots on standby. Let them do it, but they're not going to. There are ways around the filibuster that progressives don't want to engage in. They want the spectacle of it, and this is why House Democrats keep sending gun control and all this crazy legislation to the Senate, is because they're trying to whip up their base and fundraise. They're not actually trying to solve the problem.
30.
And as long as Manchin is saying, I'm not getting rid of the filibuster, and Sinema and Feinstein, and they know the pressure that would come on them if they did give it up, it's not thus far going to happen. Maybe they can be persuaded, but I have a hard time believing it, just given the dynamics of the Senate right now. They don't want the mob coming for them every single time there's an issue. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you'd like to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. In the next hour, Jessica Anderson is going to join me. She is the executive director of Heritage Action for America. They are doing a voter integrity project here in Georgia. I want to speak very briefly on this. My buddy Ken Cuccinelli reached out to me last night. He had asked to be on the program, and there are a lot of things going on, some of which I can't really talk about yet. I'm ready to tell you, but I can't yet. And it was kind of hard to get him on this week to talk about the issue. And then having made my case, I wasn't sure I wanted to get into a massive debate on it, although I'm happy to have him come on. He supports the Senate legislation. My point to him, I told him in an email last night, it's like I don't have a problem with someone coming on who supports the Senate legislation when I think the House legislation is preferred. The only reason I think the House legislation is preferred is because the Senate legislation isn't going to pass the House. There's a lot in the Senate legislation that's good. Jessica Anderson and I will talk a little bit about it at the top of the hour, but one of the things is restricting the absentee vote. You can't restrict the absentee vote to seniors in the military and get it through the House of Representatives. There aren't the votes there, and they would rather scuttle the whole thing than see that happen, and that's part of the problem. Now, there are some good pieces in the Senate legislation that aren't in the House legislation. I'm actually in favor of cutting down on the number of days of early voting. You've got the absentee ballot. You don't need the early vote. I am very much in favor of stopping weekend voting. I don't think you should vote on the weekend. And it is philosophical for me. It has nothing to do about stealing elections. It's philosophical. Those workers at the boards of elections are already underfunded and underpaid. They need days off too. And I think that doing weekend voting is ridiculous. And the election is supposed to be on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. If you don't like it, show up on election day and stand in line with everybody else, or vote by absentee ballot. It is worth noting that in Georgia, it was the Republicans who won the early vote both times. They won it narrowly in both cases, but they won it. Republicans do tend to like absentee balloting or early voting, but I don't think we need I don't think we need 20 days of early voting. Iowa is getting blasted for reducing their number of early voting days to 20. We've already got 20. I don't think we should even have 10. Do it the week before if you're going to do it at all. I personally don't think we should do early voting. Again, you vote by absentee or you show up on election day. This whole let's spend multiple weeks of getting people to... No, I think that's BS. There's no reason to do it other than we're somehow trying to make it super easy and efficient. And I realize this is going to get me blown up by the left. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think voting should be easy. It is our most sacred right. It is one that we should not be flippant about. And philosophically, it is one where I think that we should all show up on election day and do it unless we've got to be out of town. Now, the last several elections, I have voted by absentee ballot. It's there. I'm taking advantage of it in large part because I do have to be on radio and television on election nights. I don't typically know what the schedule is going to be until the weekend before the election. And so out of a precaution, I've been voting by absentee balloting because the odds are I'm not going to be around on election day near my precinct. And in fact, in the last several elections, I haven't been. Had I not voted by absentee, I would not have been able to vote on election day. But you know what? I prepared. And I don't know why we don't have everybody else prepare. Go get your absentee ballot. Now, I don't think we should restrict absentee ballots to just old people in the military. I'm sorry, seniors. You know, they get mad at me when I say old people. Senior citizens and the military. You hurt the Republican vote in North Georgia if you do that. But I'm opposed to early voting in general on principle. I think we make it too easy to register to vote. I think we make it too easy to vote. I know that Democrats philosophically believe that everyone should be able to vote and it should be as easy as possible. I don't. I don't, in large part because I think that voting is our most sacred right in this republic. And as a result, we should be in it together. I do favor the Democrat idea of having Election Day be a national holiday. I think it should be. And we should all stand in line together, not having to worry about going to vote that or going to work that day. We should sweat together, freeze together, get wet together in the rain, and cast our votes. I think there should be more funding and more precincts and less lines by doing that. But I don't think early voting is a good idea. I think it breaks down some tangible appreciation for what Election Day is. When you can go have any day be Election Day, it minimizes the significance of the Election Day. You can disagree with me. I think you're wrong. You may think I'm wrong. And frankly, I think it should be harder to register to vote. It should be something that people deliberately want to do. I think too many people vote. You know, some Republican congressman's getting blasted for saying too many people vote. They do. The Democrats, the progressives in the House, wanted 16-year-olds to vote. I think you should have to pay taxes to be able to vote. I think if you don't pay taxes, you shouldn't vote. Why are you able to go cast a vote and take my money from me? I think it should be more. I think that expanding the franchise too broadly is a bad idea. I do. Philosophically, I do. If you are an adult citizen of the United States who pays taxes, you should be able to vote. If you're an adult citizen of the United States who doesn't pay taxes, I don't think you should be able to vote for a politician who wants to take my money and give it to you. I personally, if I were king for a day, I would say if you work for the federal government, unless you're in the active duty military where you might die on the job because you're in the military, I don't think you should be allowed to vote. I personally think that we should repeal the amendment that gives the District of Columbia the right to vote. I'm a restrictionist when it comes to voting. And by the way, I'm right. You may not like it, but I actually am right. Too many people go in and people aren't serious. They're not informed. Stupid people vote. I see no reason to let that happen. But forget the philosophy of voting. In the practical reality of voting, the Senate legislation isn't going to pass the House of Representatives because the Speaker of the House is opposed to it. And they're going to have to go into a conference committee and get a better piece of legislation. And one of the defining moments is the issue of restricting who can vote by absentee ballot. Well, I don't think anyone should vote by absentee ballot unless they're a senior citizen or in the military. Philosophically, you either have to show up on Election Day or you don't vote. I think in reality, that's not the way the system works. And if they were to do that, it would hurt the Republicans. And they need to allow absentee voting if they're going to get rid of early voting, which they should do. They're going to have to allow absentee voting to be expansive. Now, along those lines, there are a couple of other things they should do still. One, fundamentally require a photo ID number on the interior envelope of your absentee ballot. Put it on the application and put it on the interior envelope. Not the exterior envelope, because then you can have ID theft. As people see your driver's license number on the exterior of the envelope, that would be bad. Require it on the interior envelope and or somewhere on the inside so that people can't see it as it's passing through the mail. And they've got to verify your ID based on that number. No driver's license number or photo ID number, no absentee ballot. Just like with your signature, automatically reject it. I think that's a reasonable way to get photo ID into the absentee balloting process. I think that's a reasonable way to ensure the integrity of the process. Now, I also say this. I acknowledge, and I think all of us have to be willing to admit, this looks really bad. The Republicans actually did very well in their legislative races. Remember, Republicans were expecting about 12 losses in the State House and State Senate. They wound up, I think, losing a net of 2. But they picked off the Democratic leader in the House in the process. But they lost the presidency by about 11,000 votes. They lost the 2 Senate seats. They lost the 2 Senate seats, all the data shows, because Republicans stayed home, not because Democrats overwhelmed them. But this does make them look like sore losers. This does make them look very much like they're changing the rules because they lost. And that's what the Democrats used to do in Georgia. And I was critical of the Democrats for doing it. I'm critical of the Republicans. They should have never expanded it the way they did to begin with. They should have left it restrictive. But they're the ones who opened it up, and then they got sloppy. The Republicans in the state of Georgia stopped organizing. The Republicans in the state of Georgia stopped coalition building. The Republicans in the state of Georgia stopped identifying new voters. The Republicans in the state of Georgia stopped persuading people to vote for them. And that's where Stacey Abrams came in and filled the void. And they're doing this now 100% because they feel like they lost in November. They're not doing it out of principle. They're doing it out of protection. As I mentioned the other day, there are plenty of other things the Republicans in Georgia could do and should do. But they're not. And they're not doing it because they're only about their own protection. They don't care about you. They're perfectly happy to ignore the Board of Pardon and Paroles, allowing out of prison the world's most prolific collector of child pornography. He roams the streets of Atlanta this very day. They are perfectly happy to let that person out of jail and do nothing to the Board of Pardon and Paroles because that doesn't affect them. It affects you. They're perfectly happy to avoid voting on the Girls Sports Protection Act. By the way, the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves, signed into law the same piece of legislation the Georgia Senate is too cowardly to vote on. The governors of other states, the governor of Iowa, the governor of Idaho, the governor of Mississippi, the governor of Texas, they're all willing to do this sort of stuff. The state legislature in Georgia, the governor of Georgia would be willing to sign this legislation. It's the state legislature in Georgia that won't do it. They're only about protecting themselves and otherwise what the Chamber of Commerce says. The only time the Georgia legislature defies the Georgia Chamber of Commerce is when the Georgia Republicans in the legislature perceive that what the chamber wants could cost the Republicans power. And they are perfectly willing to do whatever it takes to protect their own power, even at the expense of you. That's what you got to understand. Even at the expense of you. And I'm kind of at a loss these days as to what to do. You got to wage primary campaigns. But you know, one of the things the Republicans are trying to advance right now is new super PACs that they would control where they could weigh into primaries and get rid of all the conservatives in the legislature. They're trying to do that as well. Preservation of their power. That's where we are. It's the Georgia Republicans who are failing. And it's unfortunate. It's sad, but that's what we're dealing with. The Republicans in Georgia are cowards except when it comes to protecting their own power. That's why they're advancing this legislation. They could have done it sooner. Remember, it was the Republicans who put in all the expansions they're now restricting. The Democrats were smart enough never to do that, and the Republicans took over. And now the Republicans are going back to what the Democrats had in place. And of course, it does look bad. And it is bad in that sense because they're changing the rules just to win. And I'm sure some federal judge will use that against them and say there's no rational basis to do it, even though there really is. They should have never done it to begin with. They are living with the consequences of being cavalier in their policy. And by the way, it's going to come back to haunt them that they're protecting themselves and they never, ever do anything to stand up and protect you.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 877-
Hello there and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. I want to go back to something that's bugging me nationally right now. I want to play you a couple of clips. I mentioned Ken Cuccinelli. Listen to him on television talking about the border situation.
Yeah, and Chip Roy talked about this, Congressman Chip Roy. You've got Mexican officials speaking anonymously now about how dangerous this is. And we're going to see, again, it's really going on, we're just not testing for it, the recycling of children across that border by the cartels. This is a bonanza for the most vicious, evil organizations in the Western Hemisphere, the Mexican drug cartels who do control that border.
That was Ken Cuccinelli, and this is Chad Wolf, the former head of Homeland Security.
I think at the end of the day, not only her comments, but certainly comments that the administration has made over the last several days, I think you have to say that the crisis that we currently see is the Biden plan, is what they had in mind all along. Whether they thought that they would get the numbers as quickly as they have is up for question, but I think this is their plan. But when she talks about inhumane or a humane policy, that there's pent-up demand, I vehemently disagree with that. I think it's the most inhumane message that you can give, and you can sell all of these individuals a lie. And what do I mean by that? We know that the vast majority of these folks do not qualify for asylum. And so they are eventually going to have to be deported or leave the country and go back to their countries of origin. They know that. The Biden administration knows that. So they are selling these individuals a lie, encouraging them to put themselves in the hands of smugglers and traffickers. And so my opinion is that is the most inhumane message and inhumane policy that you can deliver.
One last piece of audio. This is a Democratic Congressman, Henry Cuellar of Texas.
And I'll say this quickly. There are three messages, and I want to put yourself and myself, if we're in Central America. One message from the White House, don't come now, come later. Message number two from the family members and neighbors, hey, Pedro, ya pasamos. Hey, we're able to come over right now. Message number three is from the criminal organizations, hey, I can get you across, pay me a little bit of money. And they are going to listen to message number two and number three. Quite honestly, that is what's happening till we have a solid message that we can send down to Central America. And by the way, I was involved with the first $750 million for Central America. We put, total, we put almost close to $2 billion since we started this program, almost $2 billion, and we're still facing the same situation since 2014.
Y'all, my dad texted me a little while ago. Remember last year, the outrage over the spring breakers? The spring breakers in Florida who were, well, they were having a moment, weren't they? They were down in Florida. They were partying, getting drunk, and the media was outraged. The media was actually pretty horrified by what was happening. And there was national outrage by a CBS News report that showed the spring breakers going out, having a good time, gathering on the beach, living it up, and wondering if they were going to be super spreaders. And it actually turns out that in some places there was some spread, but in most places there wasn't. But the media was outraged by American kids going to Florida to have a good time for spring break. Now, what about the illegals crossing the border? If spring breakers in Florida were anathema to the media, if they were deeply hostile to the media, what about all of the COVID positive illegal aliens at the border? By the way, I wonder when I'm going to get canceled for calling them illegal aliens. But what about them? Notice the media hasn't really given that as much airtime as they gave to spring breakers in Florida last year. Notice that they've avoided the conversation. It was such a big deal. Mass hysteria on the beach in Florida led by CBS News. And then NBC News and ABC all started covering the spring breakers in Florida. What about the illegal aliens? Where are they? Where is the coverage of that? Is that not a super spreader event? If the parties at the beach were supposed to be super spreaders, isn't it funny how that works? The George Floyd rioters, no, they're not super spreaders. The white kids at the beach, oh my gosh, they're super spreaders. The illegal aliens, they're not super spreaders. The small business owners who wanted to get back to work in process, they're super spreaders. It's funny how that works with the media. Spring break partiers are super spreaders. George Floyd protesters are not. Small business owners are super spreaders. Illegal aliens, COVID positive already at the border, are not. Again, is it any wonder that the American public has turned on the American media? Is it any wonder that the public is tired of press coverage? Is it any wonder they're going to alternative sources? And is it any wonder the media is doing everything they can to silence all those other sources? They've got to. They got to do it. If they don't do it, if they won't do it, well, the people are going to continue to see that the media has been feeding them a bunch of propaganda, not actual truth. Their truth, not the truth. A narrative, not facts. It's nuts. It's unfortunate, but it's where we are. It's where we're headed. I mean, we are going to a dark place with the American media. They have become propagandists. They attack Fox News to cover for their own sins. It's not going to work for them. When we come back, Jessica Anderson from the Heritage Action for America is going to join me to talk about Georgia's voter legislation and what they're doing with voter integrity in Georgia. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you would like to be on this here program, is 877-97-ERICK, E-R-I-C-K, 877-973-7425. Joining me by phone is my friend Jessica Anderson from Heritage Action for America. Jessica, how are you?
Hey, Eric, how are you?
Great.
I'm good.
I know you guys are involved now in the election integrity down here in Georgia, which is just a mess. And wanted to talk to you about it and see what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. So basically, all eyes in the country are on Georgia right now, which obviously has been something that y'all have been through before. And so we've got these bills that are moving through the state, House, and Senate as we speak. You guys had crossover Monday. They're going to conference committee soon, and the package of bills are causing quite a controversy. Even just yesterday, the lead sponsor of the House bill, Barry Fleming, he was fired from his day job for supporting the securing election package. So we want to give some help to the state. We think most of these reforms are really strong. We think there's a huge opportunity to get even better bills on the books for the state. And as they sort out the differences between Senate and House side, I think you're going to hopefully see a final product that we, as voters all across this country, look to the state of Georgia for leadership here, hopefully we'll be happy with.
Well, and you know, I haven't talked about this story, and so I'm glad you brought it up, because I guess the news broke yesterday, and I hadn't seen it, that Barry Fleming, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, was fired as county attorney in Hancock County here in Georgia because he supports election reform, which is kind of crazy, particularly when the House bill that Barry Fleming authored is a rather mild bit of election reform compared to what the Senate is offering. And of course, they're going to have to go to a conference committee to get this done. So what are you guys, as far as you're monitoring these bills, what position are you taking or what are you advocating for in the legislature?
So we would like to see basically the most conservative or the strongest form of election bills move through. And so what I mean by that is more transparency, more security, and all with this effort to restore faith in our election system. And by the way, Eric, what we're fighting for, these common sense reforms that are some are in the House side and some are in the Senate side. When you look at the polling across the country, over 80% of Americans support this. So these are things like signature verification for mail-in ballots, verifying voter citizenship, transparent voting records. And so these are not things that are outside the mainstream or outside common sense. And so the House bill that's moving through Georgia, whether or not it will include the prohibition on automatic voter registration, we don't know that yet. That will be determined in conference. But there's good things in there for verifying the accuracy of voter rolls. And then the Senate bill specifically includes no excuse absentee voting, which we very much support and very much like, and would urge conference committee to take that provision from the Senate side. So it's a jump ball as they go behind closed doors in conference committee. But the bottom line is Georgia has a huge opportunity right now to pass these strong reforms to overcome the massive distrust that's in the system. And these are really big problems, I think, that the state has. And there's a clear urgency and leadership to pick up these issues and tackle them. And it's a shame that cancel culture is going after Mr. Fleming for this. He's clearly doing his job, and the majority of Americans support that.
Yeah, for the people who are listening outside of Georgia, and I know we've got a large number, about to have more. This measure that Barry Fleming authored, just for perspective, allows expansive absentee voting. It's one of those where the Senate version says, I think you got to be a senior citizen, certify you're out of town or disabled or in active duty military to vote. The House version keeps absentee voting the way it is. All it does is require a driver's license number to comply with photo ID law and cuts a Sunday out of early voting. It's a pretty minor law that even a lot of Democrats favored most of the provisions. To fire him as the county attorney of Hancock County is nuts for that, considering particularly the Senate version. If anything, this may embolden House Republicans to add more of the Senate bill. This may actually undercut, which would be hilarious if it happened. Now, I want to jump to a larger issue with you, because one of the things that HAVA does is great grassroots mobilization and organization. And one of the failures of the Republicans in Georgia really in the last several years has been they kind of stopped doing voter organization, door-to-door advocacy, continuing to build and update lists of who voters are, what they believe, who undecideds are, who might lean their way. And I know that's something you guys have done in the past and wanted to talk to you about your efforts as an organization looking forward to 2022, 2024. What are you doing and what should people know about your efforts and how they can help?
Well, the work in the grassroots is critical in my mind for any opportunity that we have to take back the House or to take back the Senate federally, and certainly to take back the White House. And so we've got a group of what we call Heritage Action Sentinels that are active in Georgia. They're active in other states across the country as well. But they fight for everything from state reforms, like what we just talked about, to pushing back against the disastrous bills that are going through the United States Congress right now under Nancy Pelosi's leadership. And so we organize everybody at the community level. We want to provide insights and analysis to the bills and legislation that are moving, and then we turn it over to the grassroots, and we ask them to leverage their relationships, their community leadership, call their member of Congress, write letters to the editor, engage on social media, actually organize your communities, because the reality is not only do we have structural problems with the larger party at times, but we don't have the benefit of the unions. I mean, the unions stay in communities year after year after year for the Democrat machine. Republicans often pull out of town the day after the election. So we think we can go in and actually work these communities, talk about the issues that are moving through Washington or at the state house in Georgia, put them in front of voters' minds, and then constantly go back to them. So we call it softening the voter. And basically all it means is keeping an open dialogue and an open conversation in a non-election year with voters on the issues we all care about. That way we don't wake up in September of 2022 and just now decide to talk to our neighbors about the election and things that are going out the stake. So we're going to start knocking doors again in Georgia, probably in about 30 days. First thing on the docket is looking at HR 1 and S1. This is the For the People Act. That would be a huge federal overreach, federal grab for elections. It would overcome any state laws. And the two Georgia senators need to know exactly how voters in the state feel about this issue. And we want to make sure that voters across Georgia know just the dangers if they and when they inevitably support this bill on the Senate side. So I think there's a lot folks can do. You can find us at our website, heritageaction.com, and our state coordinator lives in Atlanta and can meet with you and hook you up with other grassroots activists that are involved as well.
Gosh, fantastic. Listen, it's always a pleasure to have you stopping by and great to keep everybody informed. And I will keep pushing people to y'all's website. It's such a good organization.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Jessica Anderson, Heritage Action for America. heritageaction.com, the website. You go check them out. The Democrats, interestingly enough, may actually have just helped convince Republicans in the House to go further than they otherwise would. I can't imagine. So let me give you some inside scoop. Barry Fleming is a conservative. His law firm is over in the Augusta area, and conservatives tried to get him to run against David Ralston this past time, and he would have had the votes. That's the thing you need to understand. Barry Fleming had the votes to become Speaker of the House in Georgia and oust David Ralston, and chose not to do it. He chose not to do it. Ralston and Fleming authored together this bill on voting rights in Georgia that was not very restrictive. The Senate version goes way further than either of them were comfortable going. But cancel culture, having now come for the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, costing him a significant client in Hancock County, Georgia, could very well push the House Republicans in Georgia to go further than they otherwise would have. It was probably a strategic misstep by the wokes to target Barry Fleming, who, by the way, is liked across the aisle pretty tremendously as well. Barry Fleming has good relationships with Democrats, even as they don't agree. And coming after him like that isn't going to be very good. I'll tell you what else doesn't help Democrats, particularly here in Georgia. Doesn't help them having John Ossoff going on television and saying this.
As Senator Warnock said yesterday, thank God for Georgia. We would not have passed this legislation had we not won these 2 runoff victories on January 5th. So for anybody who ever doubts that elections have consequences and that voting matters, the thousands of dollars of economic relief that working families are about to receive, the hundreds of billions of dollars for the public health effort and to reopen our schools, the most progressive economic relief package passed in generations by the U.S. Congress, 0% of the tax credits and stimulus checks going to the top 1%. Promoting economic recovery by getting help directly to working class and middle class people would not have been possible had folks not turned out in record numbers in Georgia in early January. That's the beauty of our democracy. The people's voice is what counts. The people demanded this economic relief. Georgia voters demanded this economic relief. We've delivered this economic relief. Now it's time to pass voting rights measures and to advance a bold and historic infrastructure plan.
Yeah, having John Ossoff go on TV and say Georgia got all these progressives elected, and but for Georgia, we couldn't have gotten all this progressive legislation. When you dive into the exit polling data still, and when you talk to voters, the Georgia Democrats have clearly misinterpreted what happened in January. They really do think there's been some sort of decisive shift to the Democrats in Georgia. It ain't so, folks. And the data bears that out. The Republicans, had they shown up, would have won. And they didn't show up because so many of them thought the race was going to be stolen. And had they shown up, had they done this, had they engaged, the Democrats would have been crushed. There was a lot of psychological warfare from the Democrats. You know, it was Democratic groups running. Marjorie Taylor Greene up in North Georgia, and the Democrats basically were on the same page that the race was stolen. Don't even bother to go vote. I mean, Democrats actually were running billboard campaigns around the state saying it's going to be stolen again. Don't vote, making it sound like it was Republicans when it was actually Democrats. It worked. The psychological campaign against the GOP, already suffering from the wound of President Trump losing Georgia in November, that worked. But that was 2020. 2022 is on the horizon. You may have Herschel Walker get in the race. There's already polling out today that's saying Herschel Walker would be ahead of Raphael Warnock. Even among black voters, they'd vote for Herschel Walker. The Democrats, they're getting a little confident. They shouldn't be. The data is not there for their level of confidence that they have, and they're going to get a drubbing in 2022 in Georgia if they're not careful, and they're not going to be careful.
News and in-depth analysis.
you knew it was coming. It was only a matter of time. Netflix has decided to crack down on people who share their accounts. A Netflix subscriber shared a screenshot on Twitter, according to Cord Cutters News, showing that the streaming service is making a move to crack down on password sharing. The message asks the user if they live in the same household as the account owner, with a prompt to enter a code delivered by text or email. The Streamable was first to confirm with Netflix that the message is real. This test is designed to help ensure that people using Netflix accounts are authorized to do so. Password sharing has always been an issue for Netflix. In October of 2019, Netflix execs shared during a quarterly earnings call that they were monitoring password sharing and looking at consumer-friendly ways of preventing it. While asking for a verification code seems like a consumer-friendly way to crack down on the problem while also offering a level of security for an account, Netflix has also commented that it performs hundreds of tests among users, so there's no guarantee that these messages will be put into effect permanently for all users. A number of studies on password sharing have shown that as many as 50% of Netflix subscribers are sharing their password with someone outside their home. And the Netflix terms of service specifically prohibit password sharing, saying the service and any content viewed through our service are for your personal and non-commercial use only and may not be shared with individuals beyond your household. You know, this is going to be the next thing that they do have to crack on. The number of people I know who share passwords, not just for Netflix, but for other things as well, ESPN accounts, Amazon Prime, you name it. It's growing, and as people cut the cord, I think there's going to be a big shift. Now, there's something else here to be mindful of. The way the streaming services are beginning to work, it's almost like we should go back to cable. You know, I've got a cable TV package. We do not watch cable TV in our house. I use it because if I need to pull up a live feed for C-SPAN or CNN or something else on this program, I can use my account to pull it up. Otherwise, I couldn't. We don't. So I essentially now use it as a business expense, or it used to be for household. And in our house, the kids watch YouTube. They'll watch Apple. They'll buy stuff off of iTunes. They do Disney Plus, the Marvel stuff on Disney. Neither of my kids, I think, are even really watching Netflix these days. I've got an HBO Max. And you know, we're all going bankrupt, $5, $10, $15 a time. They keep raising prices on the stuff. At some point, Netflix is going to be as expensive as my DirecTV bill. And then I've got on top of it all these other streaming services. I got the Paramount one so that I could bypass cable to watch the CBS stuff. There were some of their CBS streaming shows I wanted to watch Picard, and it was not as good as I wanted it to be. The Voyager thing is just dreadful. And I just my problem is that some of these streaming services at this point, you're buying them and you're getting a show or two that you like, but the rest of the package just isn't that good. Like, for example, I'll tell you my one, and y'all can roll your eyes because this is so typical of me. There's a British gardener. Half the audience just turned the channel when I said that. There's a British gardener. No. There's a British gardener. His name is Monty Don, and I've been a long time fan of this guy. And he does series. You used to be able to get him on Netflix. He did an Italian garden. Shut up, Charlie. The Italian garden series. There was a French garden series, and essentially he weaves through the elaborate Renaissance gardens of France and Italy history. He's done one on British gardens. He's done one on American gardens. And he did one on paradise gardens. Now, growing up in the Middle East, if you don't know what a paradise garden is, Middle Eastern Islamic paradise gardens are really, really elaborate affairs divided into quarters with a fountain at the center, that spreads water, dividing it into four quarters. You walk above, looking down into the garden. It's essentially a depiction of heaven and earth coming together in the garden, like the Garden of Eden. Islam is derived from Old Testament Judaism, builds upon that foundation and interweaves Christianity into it. And so the garden symbolism of the flowing water, the rivers of life, are in these Islamic gardens, and they're beautiful. And I was fascinated by it because I grew up in the Middle East and know what a paradise garden is. I've been to some. I was never obviously able to go to the ones in Iran where they still maintain some of them, and they're amazing. They've got some in Turkey that are incredible. And in Spain, where the Islamic conquerors for a long time were there, they have some, and they're elaborate. But so I had to subscribe to a British package called Acorn that gives you basically everything on British TV, just to watch the Garden series from Monty Don, because it was blocked on the internet. I found his American Garden series on the internet. You can find it and stream it on the internet for free. They took them all off Netflix for reasons I don't know. That's part of the problem with Netflix is you got stuff there 1 minute and the next minute it's gone. But now I got to get rid of this package because I've watched the series and there's no more to be seen, and I don't want to keep watching these British series. So I don't know, but we're all going to go bankrupt one of these streaming services at a time. At some point, they're going to be too many. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I'm a professional. I think I can get away with doing this. Maybe not. Because I'm going to be super nebulous, super vague. I've told the story before, and you're just going to have to suffer through it again. I was not supposed to be a radio host. I mean, some people get it. I know people who got it. Like, y'all know Neil Bortz. Neil Bortz, he was on WSB, nationally syndicated host. Bortz got his start in radio when he was in high school. He was listening to a local DJ play records on the radio, and at one point messed something up and dropped an F-bomb live on the microphone, and Bortz hopped on his bicycle and pedaled down to the local station, I think it was in Pensacola, Florida, and applied for the guy's job and got it. And then became a lawyer in Atlanta, and the local morning show guy in Atlanta committed suicide years and years ago. Bortz was on his way to court. He was a lawyer, and instead of headed to court, drove down to the local radio station and applied for the job and got it. He wanted to be in radio. I remember when I heard Rush Limbaugh for the first time. I was with my dad. We were somewhere around Tuskegee, Alabama on Highway 80, driving to Macon, Georgia to check out Mercer University as I began my tour of colleges. He was looking for Paul Harvey and couldn't find Paul Harvey. But we stumbled across this voice on AM radio and never left. When I was in high school, I never even thought about doing radio, but I thought, man, I would love to sit behind that guy's microphone one time and just try to do what he does, but never really was, I'm going to be in radio. Never even expected it. When I was in college, I would come home between classes at Mercer in Macon and go into my dorm room at Plunkett Hall. And it was the only dorm at the time that had private bathrooms. I didn't want a community bathroom. And I would take a nap and have Rush Limbaugh on the radio. And it was just cool. And then I started Red State in 2004. It was really three friends of mine, Ben Dominich, Josh Trevino, Mike Grabowski. They started Red State. They brought me in very early. I was there day one when they took it live, and they put me in charge of it because I was an elections lawyer and could write. And they needed one of those lawyers, and I could do it for free. And they put me in charge of it, and away we went. And I sent a note to the open general contact line at Rush's email address. It's like lrushbo@eibnet.com. Back in the day, I think it was like rush.comments@eibnet.com. And lo and behold, not only does he email back, but he knows me. He knows who I am. And I didn't believe it was him. I assumed it was somebody. And they sent this note back. And it's like, well, please tell Mr. Limbaugh how much I think of him, been listening to him since high school, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, it's really me. Here's my private email address so I can prove it. And we struck up a not very deep friendship, but friendship, and saw each other in person a couple of times. And I would never work up the courage to play golf with him because I sucked. But lo and behold, along comes the situation in Macon, Georgia, where the local guy in the mornings on WMAC in Macon got arrested, and they needed somebody to fill in. And I mean, I didn't know jack about radio. Kenny Bergamy, who had been the prior morning show guy for years there, had let me fill in for him a couple of times because I was like, I'll try it. But it was like 3 hours, no phone calls, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. I'm not a morning person. And that was the end of it. And then a few years later, I'm on CNN. I'm running Red State, and this guy gets arrested. They need somebody to fill in for a day. So I do. I'm like, all right, sure, I'll do it. Well, that day that was on a Thursday, turned into the Friday, turned into the next week. They wound up firing the guy. And I did it for 3 months. I didn't get paid for it. I was happy to do it. It wound up being a lot of fun. And as I was doing it, it's just funny the way God works. So all things providential. The head of Cox Media Group, Bob Neal, was driving through Macon, if I remember the story right, heard me and thought it was my show. I had no idea it wasn't my show. I wasn't even calling it the Erick Erickson Show or anything like that. It was just the morning news on WMAC. And I guess at the time it was WMAZ, but nonetheless, Herman Cain was running for president. They offered me a weekend job on WSB in Atlanta. Now, at the time I was writing at Red State. I had a book coming out. I was on CNN 5 days a week. There was no way I was also doing anything on the weekend. I flat out was not doing it. I don't care what anybody said. And so I said, no, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'd love to do something with you guys, but I can't do a weekend show. And they, Greg Mosheri, who is the consultant for the radio company, reached out and said, look, we really like for you to fill in for Herman Cain if you could. If you don't want to do weekend, that's fine. Do you want to fill in for Herman? I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I went up to Atlanta and I filled in for Herman Cain, and they came in at the end of the show and said, we really don't want you to do a weekend show. Herman's running for president. We've got to find somebody to fill in for him. We separated with the guy who was going to be that guy, and we need somebody. Would you like it? And yes, but I got to ask my wife. And then I got cold feet about it. Do I really want to do something like this? I was doing so much. And I reached out to Rush for advice. And he's, you know what? I'll never speak to you again if you don't do it. You'd be crazy not to. You'd be good at it. So I did it. And I was not a radio guy. I know people, I work with people who would give their left arm to do radio. And it's remarkable. I like, Rush Limbaugh was one of those people. He started in music radio and had this idea for talk radio, and it took off. And he just wanted to be the best in radio. He didn't want to be the best conservative on radio. And there are a lot of conservatives because of Rush who want to be on radio. And I was a conservative who was blessed to fall into radio. And I didn't necessarily want to do radio. I just wanted to be a conservative. And now I'm at the point, I can't conceive of doing anything else in my life. I write. Writing still pays the bills some, but radio really pays the bills now. I went from being a guy who blogged to a guy on TV to a guy on the most listened to radio station in the country in evening drive time, which is the largest audience. I got to fill in for G. Gordon Liddy and Neil Bortz and Herman Cain, and then became a regular fill-in for Rush for several years, like 2013, 2012, 2013, to the end of 2015. And it was so much fun. And then I got the idea I wanted to do more. I went into evening drive time on the radio in Atlanta. I wanted to do more. And I actually ran the idea by Rush, and he loved the idea. And essentially a lot of radio shows, they give away the content. If they're in a large market, the station's got to pay for it. And then you guarantee that they're going to run your commercials. And that's how you make your money is these local stations. They're guaranteed to run your commercials. And if they preempt your radio show, then they got to come back and run your commercials that they couldn't run earlier, even if it means ditching their own commercials. And they got to file affidavits swearing that they ran your commercials. They got to do air checks, all this stuff. Make goods, they call it, when they make good on your ad. And I just thought, why don't I just give the radio show to the stations for free? Don't even make them run my ads. I'll figure out the advertising. And if they can run it, they can run it. They're just going to play me, and I'll cut into my own talk time to play the ads. And then we'll give them more time to run their stuff and make money. Because, local radio is always going to be around. There's this idea that local radio is going away, that local radio is disappearing from the American landscape. And it's not true. There's always going to be someone in an 18-wheeler who's listening to talk radio. And you may not listen to it live, but you'll listen to the podcast. And when you're in a local market where you hear the person live, you'll tune in. Radio is never going away. It's changing. Maybe it's not as profitable per se, but it's never going to disappear. The number of people, young people who are into nostalgia and they want to do what their parents did, and their parents listen to talk, so they want to listen to talk. They're just listening to it in different ways, in different forms, at different times, maybe on demand instead of live, but they're still listening. There's always going to be something. And there's podcasts. But honestly, a lot of people who are in podcasts, they're not really that good in radio. And I don't mean that disparagingly. But in a podcast, there's no you don't have a clock in podcast per se. I've got actual breaks I've got to hit, and I got to be able to tell you stuff, make it entertaining in that time. My job is to entertain you, to keep you listening. It's not just to give you the news of the day here on NPR News. It's not that. You'll get bored to death. You'll turn. I got to find something, and maybe I'm boring you to death right now. I don't know, but I never expected to do it. and I fell into it. And now I've done it for a decade. And now we've done this program for a year. We started this program the August 12th of 2019, and we fairly well have maxed out on available stations in Georgia. I think there are 4 markets left in Georgia. 3 of those are somewhat hard to penetrate because you've got 2 major radio groups. Cumulus, we're on the Cumulus station in Macon, and then iHeart, which is the biggie, and it has Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and they don't ditch any of them for local hosts or regional hosts, so it's hard to get in there. So we're pretty much maxed out in Georgia, and it has been a real blessing to grow this program, and I've largely, thanks to people who subscribe to my email newsletter, I've been able to use that money to grow this program because I pay for everything out of pocket. Don't actually earn a salary from this program, y'all. That's how much I love doing this. If I won the lottery tomorrow, if I won that $1 billion jackpot, I would just build a better radio product. I wouldn't retire because I can't conceive of doing anything else now. It's just great. And the people who subscribe to the email, instead of me drawing a salary, I get paid enough for my evening show in Atlanta. I just pour all the money back into growing this program. And we're starting to grow more. And we're contemplating offers from stations that are outside the state of Georgia. And we're having to philosophically decide, how can I be a Georgia show and talk about Georgia stuff for my Georgia audience and also reach out to others? Now, when I filled in for Neil Bortz and Herman Cain, their flagship station was WSB in Atlanta. And I would very frequently talk about a story out of Georgia and relate it to a national audience, like the voting rights legislation or the transgender sports ban legislation in Georgia, the failures of the Georgia Republican Party. All of this stuff translates at a national level. I wrote the other day about suicide of the GOP in Georgia, and I've gotten something like 30,000 people from Texas have shared that story because they see it happen in their state. And now the Arizona GOP is blasting out that story and driving more traffic back to it. There's ways to relate to it. Now, here's where I'm going with all of this. I'm a big believer in providence. You'll hear me at the end of this month is Good Friday. I guess at the beginning of April 2nd is Good Friday. When I got started in radio, I had actually never worked for an employer that didn't have Good Friday as a holiday. And they told me I didn't have Good Friday off. I said, well, if I'm not going to have off Good Friday, I'm going to talk about Good Friday. They had no idea what I meant. And it turned into almost 3 hours of religious program. They were all horrified. To this day, there are people at my parent company for my evening show who can't believe I talk about Jesus on the radio. It's conservative talk. It's not Christian talk. Well, yes, but most conservatives who listen to radio tend to have a faith orientation, and it helps my audience understand how I see the world. I mean, I believe there's a heaven. I believe there's a hell. I believe there's a God. I believe there's a devil. I believe that the only path to salvation is through Christ. This shapes my worldview. It's how I see the whole world. It's how when I see, for example, the wokes, I can say, that's a religion. They've got tithing, they've got liturgy, they've got ecclesiology, they've got eschatology, they've got sacraments. That it is a religion. Secularism has become a religion of various denominations. The environmentalists, by the way, are the most militant of the secularist denominations. Environmentalists actually have actual terror groups that blow stuff up and kill people, all to save the world. I mean, the problem with environmentalism is in its eschatology, that if you are one of the saved, you repent and you find salvation, you're still damned as long as all the other mouth breathers are out there polluting. The only way for you to survive is to get rid of them. That ends badly for people if they play it out over the long term. In any event, I believe in all these things. I believe that God has an active role in all of our lives and puts us on a path. And I never expected to be in radio. I never expected to be in radio. It is not something I set out to do. And most of the people I know in radio set out to be in radio. But here I am, and now I don't want to leave. But twists and turns and careers keep coming. I'm going to be gone next week. I'm going to take the week off because I'm about to, the twists and turns of radio continue to come. I was hoping I could talk to you all about them, but I can't yet. An announcement will be coming. But I will be back week after next. Alan Sanders is going to be in here, and I'm coming back after this commercial break. It's funny, though. God is so in control. And throughout this pandemic, I think people are seeing that and also seeing that there's something going on spiritually with the world. And I'm actually saving that topic to talk about on the Good Friday show, where I will be doing a Good Friday show here. And it's remarkable the way God puts all of us on paths, even when we resist. Every one of us has a path. And there are people who kind of, they bristle at that because they're like, I'm not a puppet. I make my own way in the world. Well, yeah, you think you do. But he raised you up from the dust of the earth and he stitched you in your mother's womb, and he's got a path for you whether you like it or not. And part of growing up and maturing in life is coming to terms with that fact. And I am having to do that as the twists and turns come. But it's also, those twists and turns are coming more rapidly these days. And so I'm going to take some time off and go to the Mojave Desert and shoot machine guns for a couple of days. All right. When we come back, we need to deal with a few more topics, including the Democrats may be out to oust Andrew Cuomo in New York. Impeachment hearings are about to begin. And while I've been sitting here talking to you in these last 15 minutes, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has come out with a formal statement calling for Andrew Cuomo to resign.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Erick.
All righty. Now that I'm super vague and nebulous, you're just going to have to subscribe to my Substack. It's ewerickson.substack.com. When I can say more, I will. But I am going to go to Vegas this weekend. I don't gamble. I'm just going because, well, I can go into the desert and fly helicopters and shoot guns. Not at the same time. This time I have shot guns out of helicopters, but this time I'm going to go fly helicopters and then shoot guns, and not necessarily fly. Someone's going to fly me in a helicopter. How about that? Andrew Cuomo is suddenly in a world of hurt. Another accuser has come forward. Now, don't put a lot of stock in Bill de Blasio because he and Cuomo hate each other's guts anyway. But he is now out saying it's time for Cuomo to go.
And Governor Cuomo, there are now over 55 state legislators who are calling directly for his resignation. Do you find that you're ready to do the same, a direct call for his resignation?
Yeah, Emily, the latest report and the fact that we can talk about how many people are bringing forward accusations that it's not one, it's not two, it's not three, it's not four, it's not five, it's 6 women who have come forward. It's deeply troubling, the specific allegation that the governor called an employee of his, someone who he had power over, called them to a private place, and then sexually assaulted her is absolutely unacceptable. It is disgusting to me. And he can no longer serve as governor. It's as simple as that. I think we've seen so many troubling things that have come out just in a matter of weeks, starting with the fact that thousands of people died in the nursing homes, and we still don't have the truth about that, and their families need and deserve the truth. And we know one thing, there was a purposeful cover-up, and that alone is unacceptable and disqualifying. New issues obviously around the Tappan Zee Bridge, but these 6 women who have come forward with such powerful, painful stories, and particularly this most recent report, is just disqualifying. He just can't serve as governor anymore.
Oh, notice he's tying the deaths in the nursing homes to the harassment. Now they got an issue with the Tappan Zee Bridge. It looks like Andrew Cuomo was pressuring people regarding that bridge. That's a big bridge up in New York. Cuomo says he's going nowhere, and Ralph Northam, the Democratic governor of Virginia, has well taught the lesson that you can just stay and do nothing. The difference between Ralph Northam, though, and Andrew Cuomo is that the Democrats in the New York legislature, believe it or not, the Democrats in the New York legislature are actually further to the left of Andrew Cuomo. And they have resented Cuomo's crackdown on some of their ideal model pieces of legislation. And now they're thinking, well, if we get rid of him, we could actually move the state even further left. And Cuomo has not yet figured out that that's something he should capitalize on to try to secure moderates. The moderates, of course, they don't like Donald Trump. And the moderates have been bristling at Republicans not removing Trump from office through impeachment. So they're going to have a real hard time saying that Cuomo, given what he did, should stay in office after saying Donald Trump should go. Cuomo is kind of being boxed in towards being impeached if he doesn't resign, which is a remarkable fall from grace for a guy who he absolutely was the media hero. I mean, CNN had him on all the time, and now it looks like 30 women are coming forward. New York Magazine, new allegations are coming forward. In a cover story published Friday, Rebecca Tracer reports new allegations of inappropriate behavior of Governor Andrew Cuomo by 6 women, including a former aide who alleges he groped her in private. Though interviews with more than 30 women who worked and interacted with Cuomo finds there was a pattern of him bullying and harassing women. He may not survive the weekend. Of course it's going to happen when I'm shooting guns in Vegas and not going to be here. Of course it is. Goodness gracious. All right. I will see y'all